Welcome to anyone who joined. We're going to get started in about 5 minutes. Okay, everyone, it's 1 o'clock. I think we'll get started. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today to learn the results of 3 months of research that explored opportunities to unite the emerging hemp industry for shared economic gains. Before we begin, there are a number of people we would like to thank. First, thank you to Matthew Kaiser and Sarah Wellington, our clients from the Minnesota Hemp Farmers and Manufacturers Association, who brought this opportunity to the Humphrey School. Special thanks goes out to everyone who participated in interviews for your time and your generous contributions to this project. We also would like to thank Stephen Verdorn of Verdorn Design Co. for volunteering his time to create the project logos and provide artistic oversight in the creation of the presentation, the handout, and our paper. We want to acknowledge our instructors at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, Robin Finney and Kevin Gerdes, and thank them for their guidance, suggestions, and feedback that help shape our learning and hone end results. To fellow classmates who were completing projects of their own this summer, who were co-learning and helped us advance our work. And finally, a shout out to our families who shuffled bedtime schedules, changed vacation plans, made us food, and put up with hundreds of hours away from family time to finish this project. Welcome. In 1948, gold was discovered in California. The excitement that ensued quickly spread from the West to the East Coast and around the world. It forever changed the economic landscape of California, and its effects rippled across the globe. Does hemp have the power to cultivate a similar effect on modern agriculture? Is green the new gold?
Hi, everyone. We're the Capstone team who worked on the question, is green the new gold? The four of us include Bria Rains, candidate for Master of Urban and Public Affairs, and three candidates for Master of Public Affairs, including Cian Klug-Verdorn, Barb Jacobs, and me, Jamie McBride. I'll restate Bria Rains' degree program. It's a Master of Urban and Regional Planning. Together, we bring many years of professional experience and leadership from several public agencies. On a logistical note, we'll have about a 20 to 25 minute presentation with time for questions at the end. You can type your question in the Q&A box or click on the raise your hand button to be called upon.
And now I'm going to talk about the opportunity that initiated this project and then dive into our research questions. Our client, the Minnesota Hemp Farmers and Manufacturers Association, sees an opportunity to unite Minnesota's hemp industry for shared economic gains. The organization connected with the University of Minnesota's Hemp-Free School of Public Affairs to research the state of the industry and future opportunities. We developed 3 research questions to gauge the current landscape of the hemp industry in Minnesota and to analyze and share those findings with our client and the larger hemp community. Here are the 3 questions we explored. How are different organizations, federal, state, private, and nonprofit, engaging in the hemp industry across the US? What are barriers and opportunities for growth of the Minnesota hemp industry? How can different agricultural cooperative models aid in the growth of the Minnesota hemp industry? We gathered data in several ways to answer our research questions. A thorough literature review was the first method of gathering data. It helped the team establish some baseline knowledge and helped inform the interviews that followed. Next, we conducted in-depth interviews with 10 key stakeholders in the hemp industries of Minnesota and 3 other states. Our goal was to establish an understanding of people's personal experiences and opinions relating to our research questions. This information was used to inform survey questions and round 2 interviews. Next, we teamed up with the University of Minnesota's researchers and the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, who were developing a survey seeking input from Minnesota farmers on the future of hemp research. Our team contributed 2 survey questions related to the potential hemp business models. The survey was sent out on July 22nd, and the results will be shared with the Minnesota Hemp Farmers and Manufacturers Association and publicly available this fall. Finally, we conducted a second round of interviews aimed to answer our research question number 3 concerning cooperatives. We interviewed 9 people from Minnesota and 5 other states. In this round of interviews, we contacted a number of farmers, hemp co-op members, and organizers to answer a series of questions related to co-ops and personal experiences. As we began to learn more about the hemp industry of the past through review of the literature, we recognized its prominence and realized the history in and of itself was an important finding related to research question 1. In the 1700s, hemp paper was commonplace. It is rumored that some of the first copies of the Declaration of Independence were printed on hemp paper. In the 1800s, hemp was used as legal tender in certain parts of the Americas. You could actually pay your taxes with hemp. In the early part of the 1900s, Henry Ford was experimenting with a car that ran on hemp fuel. Except for a brief period in 1943 to support the war effort, the growing of hemp was banned in the United States from 1937 until 2014. The US Farm Bills of 2014 and 2018 re-legalized the cultivation of hemp. In 2015, Minnesota created their own hemp pilot program. And from 2016, the program grew from 7 licensees to 505 in 2019.
The first research question asks how organizations are engaged in the hemp industry across the United States. In order to answer this question, we wanted to better understand the existing landscape. We identified the key actors and organizations through web searches, literature, laws, and interviews, and used that information to create the policy field map shown here. This policy analysis tool examines the organizations involved in the field, their relative power, and the interactions that occur within and across levels. In answering the question, we found that the organizational landscape of the hemp industry is unique, structurally undersupported, and misaligned. Combined with the research data, this map helped us understand the systems and interactions involved, and our hope is that the visual helps inform strategic thinking and how to support and grow the industry from a systems perspective. Across the top, there are 3 distinct levels of influence: government, support organizations, and the front line. The government level shows the federal and state organizations related to hemp in Minnesota. These organizations are the most influential in creating Minnesota's hemp program. For example, the USDA interprets the Farm Bill and distributes that information to other federal agencies and the states as guidance. States use this guidance to build their own program, like the MDA hemp pilot program created in 2015. One very important area that shows up in the interview findings is a lack of consistency at the government level, especially at the federal level, where inconsistent and changing guidelines are difficult to implement at the state level. This is important because it creates ambiguity and uncertainty in the industry, which has a ripple effect across all levels of the policy map. Moving to the middle column, as the title implies, the support level of the map shows organizations that lend assistance or advice in various ways. Many of the entities at this level are nonprofits or in the public sector. Our data has shown these support services are slow to emerge, unorganized, or non-existent, and that very few of the supports typically available to other crops and commodities are available to hemp. This has created a challenge for those in our next level of influence, the front line. The front line is where all of the regulatory guidance and enforcement coming from the government and all the different supports available from the organizational level come to fruition. Once again, data findings suggest that those at this level need more help from the support organizations. In fact, our research data suggests that because of a lack of capacity at the organizational support level, growers are going directly to government regulators for support. The front line represents the entire supply chain, which you can see graphically illustrated along the bottom of the slide. This is where policy gets played out every day for those doing the growing, testing, processing, manufacturing, and selling of hemp and hemp products. These are the folks who have the most to lose or gain in this equation.
Now let's explore what our research uncovered for question number 2, which as a reminder is, what are barriers and opportunities for growth of the Minnesota hemp industry? The data suggests that despite legalization, hemp still faces regulatory and policy challenges that are correlated with existing or historic stigma of recreational cannabis. Let's take a look at a couple of findings in the 3 categories from the policy field map. If you would like more detail, the Minnesota Hemp Farmers and Manufacturers Association will be posting our final report on their website in a few weeks. Starting with the government category, some people said that stigma and misinformation related to hemp's connection to recreational cannabis has led to weak or ineffective hemp policies at the federal and state level. One interviewee from outside of Minnesota indicated that personal experiences with illegal drugs of current government officials might be impeding the growth of industrial hemp in their state. Notably, though, several people within the hemp and agricultural industries expressed confidence in Minnesota's industrial hemp regulators. Relatedly, folks on the front lines generally took issue with the 0.3% limit of THC, calling it political, arbitrary, unscientific, or not based on realities in the field. Now let's take a look at a couple of findings for the support organization level of our policy field map. A major recurrent theme in the data was the view that key resources typically available to other agricultural crops and commodities have either not been available or slow to arrive for the hemp industry. This includes limited access to banking and loans, as mentioned earlier, as well as USDA grants for farmers, researchers, co-ops, and cooperative development centers. The lack of funding trickles down to all the other items on this list too. So, what did we find at the front line level? Optimism. Optimism was a recurrent theme found throughout the industry at all levels of the policy field map, but especially the front lines. This is despite the large drop in hemp prices last year and the fact that many people are still holding on to biomass from 2019. All of these things drive home the point that the emergence of hemp as a new crop is really without comparison. One particularly poignant quote from someone who has been part of the Minnesota hemp industry since the beginning was, "Hemp comes with business opportunities, market opportunities, agricultural diversity opportunities, but it also comes with God Bless America singing in the background and mom and apple pie and all those kinds of things. It represents some kind of freedom to people. It's just all these things that I don't see with corn and soybeans or small grains or sugar beets." Now let's examine the findings from our third research question, which is, how can different agricultural cooperative models aid in the growth of the Minnesota hemp industry? The data suggests that many hemp co-ops are compensating for missing industry support and structures while also trying to build a viable business. It's important to note two things about the findings on hemp co-ops. First, people's experience with their hemp co-ops varies greatly, with one person telling us their co-op is, quote, "a good example of a bad example," end quote, and another person saying, quote, "we are doing such a good job. I'm so proud of us," end quote. Second, many of the co-ops being discussed in interviews were brand new, with their first or second growing season just in 2019 when the hemp market dropped. So this slide shares the relative pluses and minuses of people's experience with co-ops through a SWOT analysis. So SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. As a reminder, this information will all be in our report, which will be available in a few weeks. Because of that, I'm just going to talk about a few bullets in each category. Let's start with strengths. A number of people said they really valued the shared business resources and best practices provided by their hemp co-op. This ranged from peer-to-peer learning and support to marketing to crowdsourced vetting of buyers and processors. A couple of co-op members said another benefit of their co-op was advocacy. The collective voice of 20 to 50 members has the potential to garner greater political capital with the right message than any single grower on their own, for instance. In the weaknesses category, managing group dynamics and group decision-making rose to the top. As you might imagine, getting and keeping folks on the same page, or at least going in the same direction, can be challenging. This can be magnified during times of ambiguity, uncertainty, or risk. Misconceptions about what a co-op actually is was a concern mentioned by several people too. They pointed out that co-ops are for-profit businesses that require leadership and business skills. They thought that idea might not be commonly understood. They were emphatic. Co-ops are not nonprofits. They need to make money to succeed. Let's move on to opportunities. Several people suggested sharing the cost of expensive facilities and equipment, such as decorticators for fiber processing or facilities to store biomass, were co-op opportunities to explore. Another one was helping small farmers gain access to large, stable buyers, for instance, General Mills or Walgreens, by pooling their product. Now let's talk about threats to a hemp co-op. Several people questioned whether the market was developed enough to start a co-op, or even gather the information to do so in an informed way. Others suggested one of the reasons they started their co-op was because the market is new and unstable. Either way, the functioning co-ops we spoke to described filling many of the gaps left by the market and lack of support organizations for the hemp industry. And finally, why and how you organize the co-op matters. Defining economic need the co-op intends to fill, setting expectations of roles and responsibilities for members and leadership, And making sure to budget funds for marketing and member management tools are all examples of advice that came from existing co-ops and are threats if ignored.
At last, recommendations. We arrived at the recommendations based on the data we collected and analyzed over the past 3 months. First and foremost, the data suggests that education, PR and marketing, and advocacy are essential to give Minnesota's hemp industry the boost it needs, begin to reduce or remove barriers at all levels, and take a step forward towards shared economic growth in the industry. Education and public relations need to happen at all levels. The general public, within the industry itself, and with policymakers. Over time, this will have a desired effect on reducing stigma and regulatory barriers, which will lead to an increase in the flow of funding for new and existing organizations, who will then be able to pick up the slack in providing the supports and services that data shows are needed. Hemp is legal. Let's embrace it. One of the key indicators of how long this may take could be dependent on our next recommendation and should be an important consideration as you move forward. That is to unite the various growers associations that have popped up since 2015. It could consist of merging the existing groups into one, at least in the early stages, or it could mean working collaboratively to co-develop shared goals, delegate roles and responsibilities, and co-create your message. There's a lot of great news about hemp. The impressive history, potential for revenue, countless uses, and overwhelming benefits, especially for the environment. Working together to create a cohesive strategy and message would be a huge step towards changing perceptions. And now our third recommendation, which is actually more of a checklist, as we don't necessarily advocate for or against a cooperative, but rather provide a sound analysis of the business model based on our SWOT diagram. As we explored the co-op model, it was difficult to separate the emergent state of the hemp industry and the implications related to co-ops. If and when the timing is right to introduce a co-op, we encourage those listening to consider the following. Seek trusted expertise for help, for startup help, like legal, accounting, or cooperative development centers. Connect with established co-ops in other states who are further along, in Canada, or with co-ops for other crops and commodities. Conduct an economic feasibility study and create a detailed business plan. These suggestions are meant to point you in the right direction. The rest will be up to the founders. So, is green the new gold? Perhaps. The excitement around the reintroduction of hemp is contagious and reminds us of a time long past. That said, there's a lot of hard work ahead, especially for those leading the charge. But this I can say with some certainty. Many of you on this call today and thousands of men and women around the country have already grabbed their pickaxes and are heading west.
Thank you for attending our presentation. As mentioned earlier, the final report will be posted on the Minnesota Hemp Farmers and Manufacturers Association website in a few weeks. We will now open up the presentation to questions. You can ask questions by raising your hand or typing your question in the chat. And I do see that Matthew, looks like it was kind of a comment, but need and want assistance, specific types of assistance desired. Matthew, I will make sure you have access. You can talk. To maybe just explain a little bit more what you meant by that question. Okay, you can talk now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. So yeah, I just noticed, one of the earlier slides that one of the common themes requested was a need for assistance. And that was one of the questions we have as an organization is, specifically what types of assistance. We do have those, ongoing ones, for farmers, manufacturers, retailers, but it really does get specific when it comes down to each individual's operations. So I'm wondering if there's any common themes that you can divulge now, or is that just, or we can wait until the final presentation's available in a week or two.
Sure, I can hop in on that. So research, and particularly about growing practices and agronomy, was something we heard from a lot of growers. People talked about how they were just kind of learning by doing, experimenting, winging it. And a lot of people talked about just wanting general, so that growing information. Another common item was help with marketing. People were wanting to get support and finding reputable buyers, and also just understanding how to do marketing. We heard from some people who thought that maybe marketing in hemp was different or more involved than farmers might be used to doing in other crops. I don't know, Cian or Jamie or Bria, if you want to jump in on any other things that you heard from folks.
I think that's a pretty good start, Barb, and I think there were maybe some things that we heard a little bit less, but that will be described a little bit more in the report in a week or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those were the main ones. I'm trying to think what other ones kind of pop up. We did hear that a key theme within cooperatives, that key value that we just mentioned briefly in the presentation, was the idea that it's like peer-to-peer support was super important from several people who were happy with their co-op, that they were sharing like best practices, and also just had somebody to kind of a quote shoulder to cry on. People thought that was really valuable, and that what was unique about that within a cooperative context was that it was a non-competitive environment, that that kind of opened it up. People weren't because they were all on the same team, people felt comfortable sharing in that environment, whereas maybe in another situation they might not feel as comfortable because they might be, see their peers as like competitors.
And I did have one more question, and this has been raised, lately as we've been discussing with several groups throughout Greater Minnesota and rural Minnesota about gathering together and forming these, these meetings where we consider starting a cooperative. That the barrier being the technology, in that a lot of farmers in rural Minnesota would be unlikely to jump in on a Zoom meeting or a webinar or any of these technological platforms, and are more likely to gather in a shared meeting space physically, and are more likely to meet face-to-face and appreciate that face-to-face interaction. And with COVID right now, that's definitely been a barrier. And so we're trying to bridge that gap by showing up in these different locations in Minnesota and gathering together, using social distancing. But was that anything that you guys found too, was technology being a barrier?
I can jump in on that. Actually, of the interviews that I conducted, largely with the frontline or the farming and production area, I only had one person who was unable to join via Zoom, and we did do a phone conversation with that particular individual. But I can certainly see that that may pose a challenge for some.
The next question was from Jeff Brinkman. Do you foresee any movement in hemp restrictions by federal authorities?
I can jump in on that one too. We have, that's not something, we actually didn't connect with USDA. We tried to, I called them several times and didn't end up talking with them. I think we might actually have some folks from the state here on the line if any of them wanted to mention anything about what's happening there. But we did not get any special information about whether the feds are going to be making any changes or doing any new things.
The next one was from Nar Gurung. Can you please comment on byproducts of hemp seed oil processing?
I can jump in on that one as well. We did hear just a little bit about the seed processing, that the things that we learned about seed processing was that people thought that there might be special opportunity there because seed processing is in hemp seed processing is similar to any other type of seed processing. And so some people indicated in their interviews that that being able to use existing seed processing equipment might kind of create synergies for some people that are already in that space. But we did not get into finding out what to do with like the seed processing, the material after seed processing. Oh, it looks like we do have somebody. So Swan Ray says, should be happy to connect with attendees about hemp seed co-product. So Swan works for University of Minnesota Extension. I don't know, Swan, do you want to say anything about that? Should we unmute you?
She's unmuted.
Okay. Go ahead, Swan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, so I work exclusively on hemp co-product. So we're doing research that's analyzing the co-product for protein and carbohydrate analysis for use in human food products. Right now, it's currently illegal to sell it as an animal feed. I sit on 2 national boards for the Hemp Feed Coalition on both the production animals and the hemp seed co-product analysis. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions you might have on feed, or feel free to go ahead and list my email contact in the chat if someone wants to reach out to me offline.
And then following up on Jeff's question about regulations, Whitney Place commented, the USDA plans to reopen their interim final rule for public comment again later next year. So there may be potential for federal changes. The election could also play a big role in producing new changes. Currently, we're working with Congress to get language passed to extend the pilot beyond October 31st, 2020.
Whitney, did you want to add anything? Did you want to say anything in person?
Hi. No, just so the MDA's hemp plan was recently approved by USDA. So as of right now, if nothing changes, we do plan on moving under the federal regulations January of 2021. There are still some things that we would like changed in the federal rules, and so we're going to continue working on that and commenting on those rules. But we do want to provide some certainty also in this space, because having the regulations, as your presentation so aptly identified, kind of keep shifting in this space is really difficult for the industry to kind of get a foothold.
And also Ben Gonzalez said he could answer a little bit about the federal regulations. Ben, I'm going to unmute you. All right. You're unmuted, Ben.
Excellent. So if you can hear me, just shoot me a wave or say okay. I've been doing a lot of research on both the USDA and the FDA and their rulings and guidance and whatnot on as far as hemp is concerned. And one of the biggest things, the biggest complaint that our lab gets from farmers about this is that the THC limitations are one of the biggest barriers to being able to raise a good crop that has a significant enough CBD or CBG levels to be a profitable crop. And they're complaining against the USDA, and the USDA really can't do much about that regulated THC level. That comes down to the Controlled Substances Act, as well as the Agricultural Marketing Act of 1946, I believe, that's been amended a number of times. So it's really going to take an act of Congress to redefine hemp as anything that is less than 0.3% THC, and neither the FDA or the DEA can do anything about that designation. So as far as the big change that everybody's looking for, I don't see it happening unless there's new legislation that reschedules cannabis as a compound, which is something that's talked about on one of the campaign platforms for president at this point. But again, that's a campaign platform, not an act of Congress, and not a legislation that's been put into place. But rescheduling cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2, or preferably to Schedule 3, would lighten up a lot of the restrictions that would be in place. But still, as hemp stands, that 0.3% is going to be the biggest issue for a lot of people. FDA has maintained a very strict policy of maintaining a public face, saying that CBD cannot be used as a food additive or a pet food additive or a feed additive or a nutritional supplement, that it's still considered part of the cannabinoids and should be regulated as a pharmaceutical compound, and just issued a set of guidelines for the pharmaceutical side of the clinical research utilizing CBD as a compound. While they've stated that policy, they've also said that they're not going to start pulling CBD from the shelves, but have also not issued any other guidance as far as the safety and efficacy of CBD as a compound. So while they're saying you still have to have 0.3% or less THC, they're not going to say that you don't have to have, that you don't, or that you shouldn't have any heavy metals or pesticides in that CBD. So those aspects of the compound are still federally unregulated. Certain states have enacted legislation to ensure better safety protocols, as they have for their medical or recreational marijuana programs. But we're still a long way from seeing that being governed under any federal oversight, either from the USDA or the FDA. Both organizations seem to be kicking the can back to each other left and right, because they're both under a lot, they're under the strict guidelines from the classification of hemp on some levels, and also because neither one of these organizations really wants to do much about this until there's better federal oversight of the plant itself.
Great.
That's
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so I just want, so Ben works with a lab, and Whitney, who just spoke earlier, is the assistant commissioner at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And so if people, when they speak their question, if they can introduce themselves first, that would be really great.
Next question is Whitney's place. What types of PR and advocacy actions do you recommend? And who is the best voice for that type of messaging?
I can jump in on that one, and certainly welcome anyone to add on if they would like. I guess a part of this project was the learning that I had personally, and learning about the historical nature of hemp and what it meant to this country and the world prior to Prohibition was really interesting for me. And so I think uncovering that history is a great first place to start with the importance of hemp historically. Also, the benefits in a modern environment and economy that we have, to the soil, the environmental impact that it has as a revenue generator, I think are all things that we could talk about that are really positive about hemp, and that were actually showed up in our data multiple times. And then I think the second part of that question, who would be the best voice for this type of messaging? I really think a unified voice of the associations, or an association, would be a great place for this information to start. I also think that down the road, a potential co-op could provide this type of ongoing PR work and advocacy as things shift and change at the federal and state levels.
Yeah, I would add that if you can remember our policy field map, the support organizations, those are like banks, growers associations, commodity groups, research institutes, land grant universities. That I would say starting there, because it seems like there is a systemic problem, right, where the growers and processors and those aren't getting the systemic support that they need. And so making sure that like there's focused outreach to banks, for instance, would be really helpful. So we heard from several people that even with FDIC changes, that maybe local banks have been reticent to jump in and provide support. So maybe there's some sort of like effort to send educational materials to banks, so they know what the hemp industry is about. They know that this is like a real legal business, and there's lots of opportunity there. Same with universities, especially extension. And so it seems like there's an opportunity for people to reach out to extension agents and people within the universities to connect with them, so kind of get them comfortable with the idea of hemp, so that they start actually working in that space. We heard in several different states actually that is an issue, that extension isn't kind of getting on board as quickly as maybe they could.
Next question is from Carol. How would any legalization of THC affect hemp and CBD? And let me just start by saying this was one of our themes that we noticed in their interviews, that people were very aware or worrisome about what kind of effects would happen if there was any legalization of THC. And that's part of why in our methodology, we did make sure to interview people within Minnesota, a state that does not have any legalization, as well as states that do have legalization, to kind of compare and see.
This is Jamie. One of the pieces we were finding in the data was that there was that industrial hemp is slow to emerge because of an associated stigma that has come from the marijuana side or the recreational cannabis side. And so while we don't have any specific answers on how it would affect it completely, there is room to acknowledge in the data that stigma does and has existed. And that could be another one of those pieces of marketing and outreach that some of those support organizations focus on.
Yeah, this was an area we actually asked people specifically, what did they think would happen if recreational cannabis became legal in your state? And, as you can imagine, that we had divergent answers. And, generally speaking, regulators and people who were kind of part of setting up regulatory processes were concerned about how, they had just invested like enormous amounts of time into setting up programs. And also there's, because of the federal approach to THC and recreational cannabis, they were really concerned about how they would manage their state programs if the feds were still against recreational cannabis, but their state had recreational cannabis. So they, have to have like separate programs, and it's separate rules. And, it even got down into making sure that the plants kept separated so they weren't cross-pollinating each other, because you might accidentally get hot hemp and things like that. We heard from others, growers, particularly from people outside of Minnesota, that they thought that legalizing recreational cannabis would make it easier for them. It might be an opportunity. But I don't feel like there was unity in answers on how this would impact the industry.
One other comment that I had was it was really dependent on how, if and how that policy got played out here in Minnesota was an important factor as well.
Next question is from Brian Brinkworth. What is the next market for hemp after CBD? Fiber can be broken down to hurd, bast, etc., but that's not an end product. What end product should we be targeting to manufacture first?
That's a great question, Brian. And so we didn't end up researching that, but we came across an organization that is a lot. So Minnesota's really lucky to have a group called the Agricultural Utilization Resource Institute, or AURI, and they just issued a report last fall that gets into like hyper detail into all the different products and supply chain information for all the different uses of hemp. So things that use the flower, things that use the stalk, things that use the grain. I really encourage you all to check that out. And in fact, when I mute here, I can Google that and plop a link into the chat for everyone.
Yes, Brian was asking specifically about what he should be making it into, and I know Barb said that she's going to be adding that, so hopefully that gives you a little more direction. And then Matthew did have a comment about, as for hemp marketing, is there a role for a state hemp checkoff for collective marketing and bargaining? Do you want to maybe add a little background to what that question means exactly, Matthew?
Yeah, so just looking through state legislation and how other agricultural commodities are treated at the state level, a checkoff is one of those options where, a committee, a hemp advisory committee would be designated by the state and would be allowed to say, a certain percentage of crops would go towards, dollar amount would go towards that collective bargaining and marketing for hemp. That's how some states have, Florida oranges, Idaho potatoes, that sort of thing. I know it's one of the corn growers. I know that there's definitely a corn checkoff here and a beet one as well. So I'm wondering if that was something that farmers had expressed a willingness or a want to see happen in Minnesota here, especially after getting the news that Montana did that as well.
Yeah, so we didn't have any people here in Minnesota that I can recall, and Jamie, Bria, and Cian, let me know if you remember differently. Anybody we interviewed here in Minnesota bring that up, although we did hear about other states doing that, and then it looks like Assistant Commissioner Place says she can help answer this question here. So let's unmute her and see what she wants
She's
to
unmuted.
add. Oh, great. All right, go ahead, Whitney.
Yeah, so we have different commodity councils for lots of different crops in Minnesota. I think we have like 12 or 15 of them. And so there's a statute on commodity councils where, you know, farmers can get together and kind of create this system so that, you know, the checkoff dollars are governed by the commodity council. We've heard some people talking about kind of forming this, but, you know, no action has taken place as of yet. On the advisory committee front, we do have an advisory committee that we utilize mostly to gather feedback on hemp regulations. And so they kind of meet every so often whenever like there's a big thing happening. Like for example, when we were putting our plan together, we would get them all together. But the Commodity Council is something that's a little bit different, and it does kind of require like an organized effort to you know, formally make that a thing amongst the farmers.
And if anyone is looking to be added to see the documents, please just request it, and then I can accept you. The next question is Iwumbwa asked, what is hemp seed oil currently used for? Is it refined for food use?
Hi, this is Barb again. Yes, and I would refer people to the AURI report. They've got all sorts of really wonderful information about the different products and uses from the different raw materials you get from hemp. And I just, like I said, I just plopped that link into the website, and if you scroll down to the very bottom of that web page, you can link to the full report.
There's no more questions right now, but I know we did prepare a couple, just things that we thought might have been a little bit more main points that we wanted to make sure were brought up. So one of our questions were, if you're going to make a recommendation on the next step, what would it be? Or were there any surprises that you saw, or was there anything that you expected or did not expect shown up in the research? Maybe we could start with the interviews specifically, and then we'll go on to anything in the literature.
Maybe Matthew or Sarah, do you guys have any comments you might want to make about the research? Was this surprising to you? Kind of what you were expecting? Do you have any special questions?
No, you know, it was really nice to see, you know, the accumulation of this research that you guys had independently done outside of what we've experienced as an organization. You know, and it definitely does align. And it's nice to see it all distilled in a single source like this. It's been really nice. Thank you.
I'm really impressed with the organization and the outcomes and the wide range of stakeholders you were able to contact and have really good interviews with and gather so much data and information to make available to the hemp public as this emerges. It was exciting to watch you go from the first week. This is like your teacher reported, but yeah, as you went from the first week, you're like, what is that? What is that? And I think you did some learning, and to see this excellent report come out that aligns with our field work from your paperwork is incredible. Really great job. Thank you.
And then also Corey Lake commented, just want to make sure everyone has my info for any insurance related questions. Yeah, it's in the chat.
Oh, I just thought of one more thing. So when we mentioned the survey, so Let's plop that into the chat too. So that survey that the Minnesota Department of Agriculture is doing with Minnesota University of Minnesota researchers is currently going on. And so anyone who, any farmers or folks in the industry who want, we encourage you to take that poll, and that information is going to be publicly available later this fall. So let's, we'll get that.
Matthew, your hand is raised. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. I guess it's not necessarily for you, but more for the participants here. But it goes back to the question that I had earlier: is the specific what are the specific types of help that are needed out there? And I know one of the reoccurring things is that marketing and sales side that you mentioned. And one of the valuable pieces of information that we can get, from a higher level is, how much material is sitting out there? What's the quality of it? What is it that the farmers would like to do with it? Do they want to manufacture and market and brand a product of their own, or are they looking to sell it? And these are more of those specific type questions that I mean, in that, when we're trying to get out there and assist all of the, rural farmers and manufacturers in Minnesota, it really is an individual type situation. And so, if information like that is something that we can start gathering, we would be better. It would help us be able to help you in the networking and forming those connections with different size purchasers or buyers, grain contracts for the seeds, equipment, materials, nutrients, all of that stuff. I know right now pest management is a huge issue, dealing with the hemp borer specifically, and working with university students from their entomology department. So if that's an issue, we want to hear about it. And so, yeah, just any of the problems. I want to know what the problems are. So, yeah, that's the open question there, I guess, to everybody.
Matthew, what's the best way for people to contact Minnesota Hemp Farmers and Manufacturers Association if they want help with pest management or marketing or any of those things?
Sure, I'll leave a message here to everybody with the general contact email here. There you go.
And then also Barb did post in the chat the survey link for anyone who hasn't already taken it. Please do. Your input greatly helps. Robin commented, or had a question, will the material linked in the chat be available after the presentation? And yes, it will be. You can continue to send requests to be accepted, and then I'm sure maybe we'll send out an email or something. Yeah, we can send out an email.
Yeah, and the presentation, if I understand it right, will be on the Minnesota Hemp Farmers and Manufacturers Association website. Is that correct?
That's my
Everybody's
understanding.
shaking their head, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you let us put it up there, we will put it up there, yes.
Okay. And Matthew has provided that link for the Facebook where it will be posted later.
Should we, looks like there are no further questions. Thanks everybody for your time and joining us for the presentation. We spent a good amount of time. We want it to be valuable information for all of you. Thanks to Matthew and Sarah from Minnesota Hemp Farmers and Manufacturers Association, to Robin Finney, our instructor, and Kevin Gertis, I don't know if he's on the call, another instructor from the Humphrey School, We have a very special thank you to a gentleman who created the visuals for us, and Stephen Verdorn. He volunteered that for us, and it was an excellent addition. I'm sure I've missed someone when I say thank you. Thanks to my co-group members, Cian, Barb, and Bria. It's been great to work with you on this project. Probably others that I'm not remembering. Please stop me.
I just want to say thank you. I saw a lot of names of folks that were part of providing information for this work and this project. And I just want to say a special thank you to you, because without you, we wouldn't have been able to pull any of this together. So really appreciate it.
Yep, ditto. And everyone, again, as a reminder, we'll have a full report available in a few weeks. It'll be on the Minnesota Hemp Farmers and Manufacturers Association's website. So make sure to check back with them. And thanks so much for your time and attention. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all.